So what happens when you have a white writer at a 16-year-old black publication writing about Jonathan Majors and Chris Brown? Let's talk about that. This is going to be a discussion on this Root article that compares Jonathan Majors to Chris Brown, which of course makes absolutely no sense. I love the fact that Dre Mack did this episode, and it makes me want to do the same because there's a lot to say here. Incredibly off in the background, by the way, is the trial involving Alec Baldwin unfortunately killing somebody on a movie set. Notice you don't have Cheyenne Roundtree and the gang talking about that, but I digress. Let's go back to the Root article. You have to wonder, has Skip Gates actually looked at the Root lately? Look, it's not like all the articles are negative, but the ones that are negative are really, really negative about African Americans. I mean, I don't know that you'd see any of this in the Daily Caller. I mean, this is a really interesting, complete change from what the Root started out as. Remember, the Root is the same publication that gave us the famous Damon Young piece, Straight Black Men Are the White People of Black People, which was just a strange piece coming from a platform that's supposed to be writing things that are positive about the black community. I guess not. I mean, it's a very strange piece that came out. It didn't come out to a lot of controversy as it should have. Remember, the Root was launched in 2008 by Henry Louis Gates, the famous professor from Harvard, and the son of Kay Graham, Donald Graham, who was running at the time the Washington Post and owning the Washington Post at the time in 2008. It was then sold from Graham Holdings to Univision in 2015. Then the site was relaunched under the Kinja platform used by the Gizmodo Media Group. That's really just a fancy way of saying that the Root is not black-owned. It's black-targeted, but it's not black-owned. And full disclosure, I wrote for the Root as a freelancer, as did the person who wrote the piece with regard to Jonathan Majors and Chris Brown. That would be Stephanie Holland. And so, interestingly enough, here we have a black themed platform and a white writer writing about Chris Brown and Jonathan Majors and comparing them as if they're interchangeable, which of course they're not interchangeable. They're two different people. Here's the thing. Believe me, there's plenty of black writers at the Root that write negative stuff about black people all the time. So I don't even know that it's news that this is a white writer, to be honest with you. It's really just in keeping with what the Root seems to like doing, which is having negative hot takes on other black people. That seems to be their thing, particularly male black people. So at any rate, let's go through the article. And to be clear, this is an opinion piece, so Stephanie Holland really can write whatever she wants and back none of it up with any facts whatsoever. So, opinion, okay, that's clearly marked on the top. In fairness, she probably didn't write the headline. What you find in a lot of these publications is that the clickbait game is so freaking important and vital to everybody that there's somebody who writes the headline that thinks about SEO. So, of course, you have in the headline the names Jonathan Majors and Chris Brown. At the end of that sentence, they're both reprehensible. That's nice. They're trying to get somebody to click this thing. So, of course, what makes that happen? Negativity makes that happen, which is why so many of these pieces are extremely negative. So, of course, here we go with the first paragraph setting the tone. When it comes to celebrity misdeeds, the internet likes to play a comparison game, and especially if they're black. You know how it goes. The person's crimes aren't as bad as that person's. So they should totally still have a career. Well, first of all, of course, the premise of this entire article is what is said on the internet, which is incredibly not scientific. So that's strange right there on its premise. And so when you are in journalism and you're not dealing with factual reality and you're just dealing with what you've read on the internet, that's probably a bad sign for the premise of the piece. The disgraced actor, as Jonathan Majors is referred to, and the endlessly controversial singer. Once again, I'm going to say it again. Black men are like the only group that you can talk this way openly again and again and again. Nobody say anything. Nobody defends anybody. Nobody brings up any facts, and nobody cares. It just sort of goes on and on and on and on. Now, obviously, if you know some of the history, you would know that Chris Brown dated Rihanna and he assaulted her. This is back in 2009. There's no way in the world that should be something that's a minor thing, because it's not a minor thing. But it is interesting to note that Rihanna has since gotten over it. Now, of course, a person can get over something, and we still as a society can sit here and say, well, still, that was a bad thing. And I think that's fine. But it is interesting that everyone else now, we're at a point now with this thing that everyone else brings it up other than Rihanna. It was 15 years ago. Frankly, I don't think time passing really diminishes it that much, although Chris Brown was a much younger person when this happened. That is noteworthy. But I do think it's interesting that Chris Brown has been accused of some things that were false, and that happened more recently. He had an allegation where it was, I can't really say the full words on YouTube because YouTube punishes people when we talk about these serious subject matters, but I'll just say this. That allegation was proven to be false, and he had the receipts through his text messages. Of course, the Root ain't writing about that because that's not going to get them the clickbait that the negative allegation, which was false, would get them. So, that's the game that we play. As for Jonathan Majors, it's pretty clear that this writer has done absolutely no checking into the Jonathan Majors case. That's a real shame because that's recent. That's only the last year. So there really is no excuse in journalism not to check basic facts. There really isn't. It's different if you go back 50, 60 years, but these things are just really in the last few months. So I don't know what the heck is going on, but this is what I mean. This is the hot take culture of journalism that gets clicks and is very shallow when it comes to facts. The one thing to always keep in mind is that Stephanie Holland, just like the rest of the public, is reading what most of the public has seen, which of course leaves out some major facts with regards to the Majors case. And I have to ask the question, I think we're to the point now where facts don't even matter. Facts don't matter because people want their narrative. They want the story to be what they want the story to be, so they leave out the facts that are inconvenient to their narrative. We see that on a lot of stories. I'm using the Majors case as a prime example because there's a lot of evidence in the Majors case in terms of video, text messages, timelines, and all that. But we see it particularly in politics, and we see it particularly with partisan news organizations. Once again, another publication leaving out the word misdemeanor because, of course, these guys have to be presented in the most negative light possible. So the word misdemeanor is just invisible. Once again, a very checkable, easily checked fact. You could search it any place. I mean, actually, in this case, you could just search it on Twitter. It is interesting, isn't it? Like, the word misdemeanor can't be in there because if that's in there, it's a signal to all the readers that this is not very serious. A misdemeanor is not a serious crime usually. So, and everyone knows that. I mean, you have to be a lawyer to figure that out. So, of course, that's missing. And just incidentally, while the New York Times writes about people who are scared because the big black Jonathan Majors is taller than I am and he was mad about a scheduling thing on set, Legal Bites is over there doing a good job on the Alec Baldwin charges. You want to hear some real charges that aren't misdemeanors? Go look at Legal Bites.
She says, and then I let go of the hammer of the gun and the gun goes off.
There are 2 charges for which the grand jury indicted him. Both of them are involuntary manslaughter charges, and both are 4th-degree felonies. The first one is involuntary manslaughter involving negligent use of a firearm. File new charges against Alec Baldwin for the on-set death of cinematographer Helena Hutchins.
There I go digressing again. It will be interesting to see, by the way, the media comparison between the Alec Baldwin case and some of the things that we've seen reported on the Majors case, right? Because on-set behavior and responsibility and he did this and that, that's all going to come out during this trial. Look, it looks, of course, as if Alec Baldwin made a tragic mistake, but it is interesting, isn't it, how forgiving everybody is about somebody in a situation where someone has lost their life. It's really actually incredible. Remember that in the Baldwin situation, they weren't even going to charge him. They weren't going to charge him, and then they decided, yeah, maybe we should charge him. I mean, somebody actually did lose their life. Somebody's dead. I can't imagine what everybody would be saying over at Rolling Stone and New York Times if that was any African-American actor, much less Jonathan Majors. That's about it. Good luck. You know, speaking of things that won't get reported by the media, remember that Kat did a pretty interesting video on a play that mirrors a lot of Miss Jabarri's story. Might want to look at that. Of course, you will never see any of that reported in the Times, Rolling Stone, or any place else. Good luck.